Before we begin, take a quick second to like this video, subscribe to Hidden Karma Stories, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single comment, and I love seeing how many different corners of the world these stories reach. Now let me tell you something. Sometimes betrayal doesn't arrive with shouting. Sometimes it slips quietly into your life, sits at your dinner table, smiles at you across the room, and waits for you to realize you've already been replaced. And sometimes the woman everyone overlooks ends up writing the final chapter. What happened to me still feels unreal when I think about it. My name is Rebecca Morgan. I'm 58 years old, a mother of 2, and for most of my adult life I believed loyalty was enough to hold a marriage together. I was wrong. I live, or at least I used to live, in a peaceful neighborhood outside Nashville, Tennessee, the kind of place where people wave from their driveways and spend Saturday mornings mowing their lawns. Everything looked perfect from the outside. But appearances can be dangerous things. By the time this story began, my marriage wasn't dying dramatically. It was disappearing quietly. Like a photograph left in the sun too long. You don't notice the fading at first. Then one day the colors are gone. The first sign came at the beginning of June. School had just let out for summer, and I decided to make a special dinner. I roasted lemon herb chicken, baked potatoes, and made my husband's favorite peach cobbler from scratch. I even lit a few candles in the dining room, something I hadn't done in years. For a moment, as I set the table, I imagined things might feel the way they once did. Back when life was simpler. Back when he looked at me like I mattered. My husband, Thomas, arrived home around 6:30. He barely acknowledged the meal. He spent most of dinner scrolling through his phone. Then halfway through eating, he set down his fork. Without warning, he looked at me and shrugged. "You've changed, Rebecca." I blinked. "What do you mean?" He leaned back in his chair. "I don't know, you're just not interesting anymore." That was it. No anger. No argument. No emotion. Just casual cruelty delivered as if he were commenting on the weather. Our children didn't react. My son Ethan laughed awkwardly and returned to watching highlights on his phone. My daughter Chloe took a sip of iced tea and immediately changed the subject. Nobody defended me. Nobody even seemed surprised. I sat there staring at the candles I'd lit with such hope and realized something painful. I had become invisible. Not just to my husband. To everyone. Later that night, I lay awake staring into the darkness. Thomas slept peacefully beside me. I listened to his breathing and thought about the last 30 years. 30 years. 3 decades of sacrifice. I had walked away from a promising career in commercial illustration when our children were born. I managed the household. I handled school schedules, doctor appointments, holiday planning, finances, every crisis, every emergency, every forgotten detail that keeps a family running. I carried it all. And somehow, after giving everything, I had become an afterthought. I remembered being 23 years old. Thomas used to stop at roadside stands and buy me sunflowers because he knew they were my favorite. He used to call me during lunch breaks just to hear my voice. He used to look for me in crowded rooms. Now he couldn't even remember our anniversary without a calendar reminder. For weeks I tried convincing myself it was stress. Maybe work was overwhelming. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I was the problem. But deep down I knew better. Something wasn't right. The next morning, Thomas left early. As he grabbed his keys, his phone lit up on the kitchen counter. I wasn't snooping. I simply happened to glance down. A woman's name appeared on the screen. Beside it was a red heart emoji. My stomach tightened instantly. He noticed me looking and quickly grabbed the phone. Then he smiled. Too quickly. Too casually. The kind of smile people use when they're hiding something. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Instead, I started paying attention. Really paying attention. Once I began noticing the details, I couldn't stop. He started spending more time in the garage texting. He began dressing better for ordinary workdays. He purchased new cologne. Expensive cologne. The kind he'd never bothered buying before. Some evenings, he arrived home carrying scents that weren't mine. Floral perfumes lingering on his jacket. Lipstick-smudged napkins tucked into pockets. Receipts from restaurants I'd never visited. I found excuses for every clue. Then I ran out of excuses. The truth was standing right in front of me. I just hadn't wanted to see it. What hurt even more was the way my children treated me. I loved Ethan and Chloe with everything I had. But somewhere along the way, they'd stopped seeing me as a person. I was the one they called when they needed advice. Money, help, support. But neither of them ever asked how I was doing. Not once. Not really. One evening after everyone went to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed softly. The house was silent. I poured myself a glass of red wine and pulled an old photo album from a cabinet. Page after page revealed the story of our lives. Vacations, birthdays, Christmas mornings, school plays, family road trips, smiling faces, happy memories. But as I studied those photographs, I noticed something else. Tiny moments I'd missed before. The distance growing. The affection fading. The gradual disappearance of the woman I used to be. I closed the album and sat there for a long time. Then I made a decision. If nobody could see my pain, they would eventually feel my absence. Not through revenge. Not through screaming. Not through destruction. But through consequences. Quiet consequences. The kind that arrive slowly and stay forever. Because when a woman reaches her breaking point, she doesn't always explode. Sometimes she becomes very, very patient. And that's exactly what happened to me. A week later, I got the confirmation I never wanted. It was a Wednesday afternoon. Thomas had supposedly left for an overnight business conference in Louisville. At least that's what he told me. Before leaving, he kissed my cheek and promised he'd call later. He didn't. Something about his behavior felt different. Too rehearsed. Too polished. After he left, I walked into our bedroom and noticed his suit jacket hanging over a chair. He'd forgotten it. I stared at it for nearly a minute. Then I checked the pocket. I wasn't proud of it. But I wasn't ashamed either. Inside was a folded receipt. A hotel receipt. Not from Louisville. From Savannah, Georgia. A luxury waterfront hotel. 2-night stay. Premium suite. Champagne package. Private dining reservation. The date. The previous weekend. A weekend he'd claimed to be attending a corporate retreat. I sat on the edge of the bed holding that piece of paper. I expected tears. Instead, I felt something else. Cold certainty. The receipt wasn't evidence anymore. It was confirmation. A few days later, I started gathering information. Quietly. Methodically. I checked calendars. Bank statements. Shared expenses. Travel records. Every discovery pointed in the same direction. Thomas wasn't even trying very hard to hide it anymore. That realization hurt most of all. The affair wasn't the deepest wound. The deepest wound was how easily he'd discarded me. As though I were an old piece of furniture. Useful once, forgettable now. One evening I tried talking to Chloe. Very carefully. Very gently. I think something might be going on with your father." She rolled her eyes. "Mom, you're reading too much into everything." A few days later, I mentioned my concerns to Ethan. He shrugged. "Dad's under a lot of pressure right now." That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not broke. Shifted. Because I realized I was completely alone. Alone in my own marriage. Alone in my own family. And once I accepted that truth, I stopped looking for rescue. I started preparing instead. Every receipt. Every suspicious charge. Every unexplained trip. I kept copies. Not out of anger. Out of necessity. Then I remembered something important. The prenuptial agreement. 30 years earlier, Thomas had insisted on one. At the time it seemed almost funny. Neither of us had much money. But he wanted protection anyway. So we signed it. Most people never read legal documents carefully. I do. And buried deep inside that agreement was a clause Thomas had long forgotten. If either spouse committed adultery, they forfeited their claim to major shared assets. The house, the savings, the investments, everything. Back then he laughed and said it would never matter. Now it mattered very much. I stopped arguing. Stopped questioning. Stopped trying to save the marriage. Instead, I became a quiet observer. A ghost moving through my own home. I no longer cooked his favorite meals. I no longer waited up for him. I no longer chased conversations he didn't want to have. Eventually he noticed. One evening he looked up from his laptop. "You seem different lately." I smiled. "I'm just tired." That wasn't a lie. I was tired. Tired of being ignored. Tired of being dismissed. Tired of shrinking myself so everyone else could feel comfortable. And somewhere beneath that exhaustion, something unexpected was beginning to grow. Strength. The kind that develops when there's nothing left to lose. And as Thomas continued drifting farther away, completely unaware of what was coming, I started imagining the moment everything would change. Not with a fight. Not with a dramatic confrontation. But with a smile. Because men like Thomas never expect the quiet woman to leave. And they certainly never expect her to win. Part 2. The strange thing about reaching your limit is that fear starts disappearing. For years I had been terrified of losing my marriage. Then one day I realized something. I had already lost it. I just hadn't admitted it yet. Once that truth settled into my heart, everything became clearer. I stopped searching for reasons. Stopped making excuses. Stopped trying to understand why Thomas had changed. Because the why no longer mattered. Only the truth mattered. And the truth was ugly. A few weeks after finding the hotel receipt, I discovered just how serious his affair had become. It happened on a Saturday afternoon. Thomas claimed he was meeting clients for lunch. I nodded and wished him a good day. The moment he left, I sat in the living room and opened our shared credit card account. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I was simply documenting expenses. Then I saw it. A jewelry purchase. $940. At a boutique jewelry store downtown. I never received jewelry. Not for my birthday. Not for Christmas. Not for anniversaries. Certainly not recently. My stomach dropped. The charge had been made 3 days earlier. I checked my dresser. No gift. Nothing hidden. Nothing waiting. That necklace had gone to someone else. I stared at the screen for several minutes. Then I printed the statement and added it to my growing folder. Another piece of evidence. Another nail in the coffin. Over the following weeks, the pattern became impossible to ignore. late-night texts, weekend disappearances, business trips that didn't exist, secret purchases, hotel charges, restaurant reservations. The affair wasn't new. It was established, comfortable, confident, which meant he believed he would never get caught. One evening I sat on the back patio with a notebook and began connecting timelines. That's when something unexpected happened. I noticed the dates. The same dates. Again and again. Every 6 weeks or so, Thomas would suddenly become unavailable for a weekend. Always with a convenient excuse. Always with some work-related story. I started checking travel records. The destinations changed. The pattern didn't. Whoever she was, they weren't casually dating. They were building memories together. That realization should have broken me. Instead, it made me calm. Dangerously calm. Because now I wasn't operating on suspicion. I was operating on certainty. One Thursday afternoon, I received the final confirmation. Thomas left his laptop open in the den. Normally, I would have walked away. That day, I didn't. The screen displayed a travel website. There was a reservation page open. 2 passengers. Not 1. 2. I didn't recognize the woman's full name. But I finally had it. Lauren Mitchell. The mysterious woman was real. Not a fantasy. Not an assumption. A real person. A real affair. A real betrayal. I sat there quietly. No tears. No screaming. No dramatic confrontation. Just silence. The kind of silence that comes when your heart finally accepts what your mind has known for months. That evening, while Thomas showered upstairs, I searched social media. It took less than 10 minutes to find her. Lauren, 47. Blonde highlights. Perfect makeup. Designer handbags. Vacation photos. Endless smiling selfies. The type of woman who seemed to document every second of her life. I stared at her profile picture. Then I laughed. Not because she was funny. Because she looked exactly like the type of woman Thomas would choose. Someone who made him feel younger. More important. More exciting. I wasn't angry with her. Not really. She didn't make vows to me. Thomas did. And if she thought she was winning some grand prize, she was welcome to him. She would eventually discover what I already knew. Charm fades. Selfishness doesn't. Around that time, something small happened that changed everything. I was grocery shopping. Nothing dramatic. Just an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I stood in front of a shelf comparing 2 different pasta sauces. Then a thought crossed my mind. A simple thought. Why am I still buying food based on what Thomas likes? For 3 decades, I avoided mushrooms because he hated them. 3 decades. The realization stopped me cold. I loved mushrooms. Always had. Yet somehow I'd spent 30 years pretending I didn't. Just to accommodate him. I picked up the mushroom sauce and dropped it into my cart. That tiny action felt strangely powerful. Like reclaiming a piece of myself. That night I made mushroom pasta. Thomas took 1 bite. His face twisted immediately. You know I don't like mushrooms. I smiled. I know. He stared at me. Confused. Almost unsettled. For the first time in years, I wasn't adjusting myself around him. And he didn't know what to do with it. A few days later, the idea came to me. Not all at once. Slowly. Like a puzzle assembling itself. I remembered something Thomas loved. Adventure. Travel. Escapes. the fantasy version of himself, the version he pretended to be around Lauren. And suddenly I saw an opportunity. A perfect one. A month later, while we ate breakfast, I brought it up casually. "You know," I said, stirring my coffee, "maybe we both need some space." Thomas glanced up from his phone. "What do you mean?" "I think you've been unhappy for a while." His expression changed. "Careful. Interested." I continued. "Maybe you should take a trip." "A trip?" I nodded. "Somewhere warm, somewhere relaxing, clear your head." He looked surprised. Then hopeful. The reaction told me everything. A man committed to saving his marriage would have asked questions. Thomas looked excited. "Really?" "Of course." "I don't know." "Yes, you do." For the first time in years, he smiled genuinely. "Not at me. At the opportunity." I saw it immediately. The excitement. The anticipation. The relief. He already knew who he would take. And he thought I didn't know. That was the funny part. People become careless when they think they're smarter than you. Over the next few weeks, I played the role of supportive wife perfectly. I researched destinations, printed travel information, talked enthusiastically about how much he deserved a break. And all the while, I was constructing something much larger. I chose Belize. Not because it was exotic. Because it was believable. Far enough away. Complicated enough. Easy for things to go wrong. I created the illusion carefully. Travel confirmations. Activity schedules. Hotel information. Transportation details. Every piece looked legitimate. Every document appeared authentic. Thomas never questioned anything. Why would he? He thought he was winning. He thought I was helping him reconnect with himself. The reality was very different. One evening, I overheard him speaking softly on the phone in the garage. His voice carried through the door. "I can't wait." A pause. Then laughter. More silence. Then, "She has no idea." I stood in the kitchen listening, smiling, because he was right. I wasn't reacting the way he expected. I wasn't crying. I wasn't begging. I wasn't fighting. And because of that, he assumed I knew nothing. The departure date finally arrived in late August. The night before the trip, Thomas seemed unusually nervous. Almost guilty. For a brief moment, I wondered if he might confess. He didn't. Instead, he sat beside me on the couch. "Are you sure you're okay with this?" I looked at him. Really looked at him. The man I'd loved for 30 years. The man who had slowly erased me. The man who thought he was about to leave for a romantic getaway with another woman. And I smiled. "I want you to be happy." His shoulders relaxed instantly. The guilt disappeared. That told me everything. The next morning I drove him to the airport. The sky was bright. Traffic was light. The entire drive felt surreal. He chatted about travel plans, restaurants he wanted to try, activities he wanted to experience. He never once mentioned Lauren. Of course he didn't. At the terminal, he leaned over and kissed my cheek. "I'll call you when I land." "Sounds good." He grabbed his luggage, walked toward security, never looked back. I watched him disappear into the crowd. Then I sat in my car for several minutes. Not crying. Not grieving. Breathing. Just breathing. Because something was finally ending. And something else was finally beginning. The moment I arrived home, I got to work. I changed passwords, forwarded emails, updated account security settings, organized financial documents, prepared legal files. Every action felt like removing bricks from a wall that had trapped me for years. The house felt different, lighter, quieter. Mine. That evening I received a text. Just landed. Thanks again for everything read. I stared at the message, then set my phone down without responding. Across the ocean, Thomas believed he was beginning the adventure of a lifetime. What he didn't know was that his adventure was already falling apart. And while he was busy chasing excitement with Lauren, I was preparing for something far more important. My freedom. The next morning I woke up before sunrise, made coffee, walked barefoot through the house, and for the first time in decades, every room felt peaceful. No tension, no disappointment, no pretending, just silence. Beautiful silence. I sat on the porch watching the sunrise and wondered how long it would take before Thomas realized things weren't going according to plan. The answer, as it turned out, wasn't very long. And when reality finally caught up with him, it would be far worse than anything he could have imagined. Part 3. It took less than 24 hours. That's all. Less than a day before Thomas's perfect escape started falling apart. The first message arrived around noon. Hey, quick question. The hotel can't find my reservation. Can you check the confirmation? I smiled when I read it. Then I set my phone face down and continued drinking my coffee. An hour later, another message arrived. They're saying the booking doesn't exist. Can you call them? Still no response. By evening, the texts became more frequent. Maury irritated. Maury desperate. Rebecca, something is wrong. The airport transfer never showed up. Can you please answer? I didn't. For the first time in years, I wasn't fixing his problems. I wasn't rescuing him. I wasn't cleaning up the mess. I was simply watching. The next morning, another message appeared. This one was different. Maury aggressive. This isn't funny, call me immediately. I laughed softly. Funny. After 30 years of being ignored, suddenly my attention was essential. The irony wasn't lost on me. By the second day, the truth was becoming impossible for him to avoid. There was no luxury resort. No private excursions. No VIP experiences. No carefully planned romantic getaway. Everything he expected was gone. The illusion had collapsed. And then came the message I'd been waiting for. A message he clearly typed in frustration without thinking. Lauren is furious. She says I lied to her. I read it twice. Lauren. There it was. His confession. Not spoken aloud. Not admitted honestly. But revealed through panic. The mistress was exactly where I knew she'd be. Standing beside him while his fantasy crumbled. I imagined the argument. The accusations. The blame. The awkward silence between them. For years they had enjoyed secret dinners and exciting weekends. Now they were facing inconvenience together. And inconvenience reveals character faster than romance ever can. I blocked his number that night. Not out of anger. Out of peace. I was done listening. The following morning I left for my own trip. A trip Thomas knew nothing about. Months earlier, while planning my future, I'd quietly booked a luxury Caribbean cruise. 7 days. Adults only. Ocean views. Fine dining. Live music. No responsibilities. No drama. No Thomas. When I stepped aboard the ship, I felt something shift inside me. For decades my life had revolved around other people. Their schedules. Their needs. Their happiness. Now, for the first time in years, I belonged entirely to myself. The ship pulled away from the dock just before sunset. I stood at the railing and watched the shoreline shrink into the distance. The wind moved through my hair. The ocean stretched endlessly ahead. And I felt free. Truly free. Not because Thomas was suffering, but because I no longer cared whether he was. That distinction mattered. One evening during dinner, I checked my email. There were 17 messages waiting. Most from Thomas, some from mutual friends, one from his longtime co-worker Michael. The subject line read, "Can you please contact him?" I deleted it without opening it. Not because I was cruel. Because I was finished carrying responsibility for a grown man's choices. While Thomas scrambled through airports, hotels, and arguments, I spent my mornings watching sunrises over open water. I attended cooking classes, read novels by the pool, took long walks on deck beneath starlit skies. For the first time in years, my shoulders relaxed. I hadn't realized how much tension I carried until it disappeared. On the 4th day of the cruise, I received a text from Chloe. "Dad says he's stranded. What happened?" I stared at the screen, then typed back, "He took the trip he wanted." A few minutes later she replied, "Mom, seriously, he's saying everything went wrong." I waited before answering. Then I wrote, "Some choices come with consequences." Her response came quickly. "Lauren left him." I sat back in my chair. Interesting. Apparently the romance had limits. I couldn't say I was surprised. The excitement of an affair is easy. The reality of hardship isn't. Once the luxury disappeared, so did Lauren. Maybe she realized Thomas wasn't nearly as charming when things became difficult. Maybe she discovered he wasn't the successful hero he'd pretended to be. Maybe she simply got tired of listening to him complain. Whatever the reason, she was gone. And Thomas was alone. Exactly as I had been. For years. That evening I ordered dessert. Chocolate lava cake. Something Thomas always considered too rich. I ate every bite. And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel guilty for enjoying something. The cruise ended the following Sunday. I returned home rested, calm, clear-minded, ready. The house greeted me with silence. Beautiful silence. I opened windows, played music, made coffee in the middle of the afternoon, simply because I felt like it. Then I began packing. Not my things. His. Every shirt. Every tie. Every golf trophy. Every random drawer filled with forgotten junk. I packed carefully, neatly, methodically. No anger. No tears. Just certainty. By midnight, 12 cardboard boxes sat neatly stacked in the garage. Each one labeled. Each one ready. Each one representing the end of a chapter. The next afternoon, Thomas returned. I knew he would. Eventually, everyone runs out of places to hide. The doorbell rang shortly after noon. I looked through the window. For a moment, I barely recognized him. He looked exhausted. His expensive clothes were wrinkled. His hair was messy. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes. The confident man who had left weeks earlier was gone. This man looked defeated. I opened the door halfway. He stared at the boxes, then at me. "What is this?" My answer. His expression hardened. "Rebecca, stop playing games." "I'm not." He pointed toward the driveway. "You packed my things." "Yes." "You can't be serious." I folded my arms. I've never been more serious. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then his face changed. confusion, fear, realization. Finally, it was starting to sink in. You're throwing me out. No. I smiled calmly. You threw yourself out. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. You set me up. I nodded. You took your girlfriend on a vacation funded by your wife. His face flushed. I can explain. No. The word came out sharper than intended. But I didn't regret it. No more explanations. He looked stunned, as though he genuinely believed he deserved another chance to talk. Another chance to justify. Another chance to rewrite reality. For 30 years I'd listened. I was finished listening. We've been married 3 decades, he said quietly. I know. Doesn't that mean anything? I looked directly into his eyes. It used to. That answer hit him harder than any insult ever could. The silence stretched. Then I added, You stopped being my husband long before I stopped being your wife. He looked away. For the first time since I'd known him, he didn't have a response. Eventually, he sat down on the curb beside the boxes. A broken man surrounded by the pieces of the life he'd destroyed. And surprisingly, I felt nothing. No triumph. No revenge. No satisfaction. Just peace. The moving company arrived an hour later. I handed them the paperwork. Thomas watched silently as his belongings were loaded into the truck. Every box, every possession, every reminder, gone. And when the truck finally disappeared around the corner, so did the last illusion I'd been carrying. The marriage was over. Not legally, not officially, but emotionally, spiritually, completely. That evening Chloe came over. Unlike her father, she looked nervous. Mom, she said softly, standing in the kitchen, what happened? I took a deep breath. Then I told her the truth. Not all of it. Just enough. The affair. The lies. The years of neglect. The loneliness. Everything I'd hidden. She listened quietly. And when I finished, she cried. Not because of what I did. Because she finally understood why. A few days later, Ethan called. His reaction was different. More defensive. More confused. But after hearing the full story, even he fell silent. Neither of them knew about the first affair. The one 15 years earlier. The one I'd forgiven. The one I'd buried. When I finally told them, they were shocked. And for the first time, both of my children saw the marriage I had actually lived. Not the version they imagined. The real version. The painful version. The truth. And somehow that truth brought us closer than we'd been in years. For the first time they saw me not as mom, but as a person. A woman. Someone who could hurt. Someone who deserved better. Someone who had finally chosen herself. And as I sat alone on my back patio that evening, watching the sun sink below the trees, I realized something remarkable. I wasn't invisible anymore. Most importantly, I wasn't invisible to myself. Part 4. The truth has a strange way of changing people. Not immediately. Not dramatically. But once it's finally spoken out loud, it becomes impossible to ignore. After Thomas left, my house felt different. Lighter. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells. I wasn't wondering what mood he'd be in when he got home. I wasn't waiting for affection that never arrived. I wasn't carrying the emotional weight of a marriage by myself. And that freedom gave me something I'd been missing for a very long time. Clarity. A week after the moving truck took Thomas's belongings away, Chloe and Ethan came over together. This time they weren't angry. They weren't defensive. They looked exhausted, like people who had spent days rethinking everything they believed. We sat in the living room where they'd grown up. The same room where Christmas mornings had once felt magical. The same room where I spent countless nights helping with homework, comforting nightmares, and celebrating milestones. Now it felt different. Honest. Ethan spoke first. "Mom, there's something I need to ask." I nodded. "Okay." He hesitated, then finally said it. Was this really the first time? The room became quiet. I knew exactly what he meant. And for the first time, I decided not to protect anyone. Not Thomas. Not myself. Not the illusions. I took a slow breath. No. Both of them stared at me. "What do you mean?" Chloe asked. I looked down at my hands, then back up. "Your father had an affair before." The silence that followed felt endless. When Ethan asked, "About 15 years ago." Their expressions changed instantly. Shock, confusion, disbelief. "With who?" I swallowed. "Diane's." Both of them froze. "Their Aunt Diane's. My former best friend. The woman who attended birthdays, graduation parties, family barbecues. The woman who sat at our dinner table. The woman my children trusted." For several seconds nobody spoke. Then Chloe covered her mouth. "Oh my God." I nodded slowly. "I found emails." Neither child could believe it. Honestly, for years neither could I. I told them everything. How I discovered it. How Thomas denied it. How he eventually admitted it. How he promised it would never happen again. And how I stayed. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because I was terrified. Terrified of breaking apart our family. Terrified of raising children through a divorce. Terrified of being alone. Ethan stood up and began packing. "You should have left him then." His voice wasn't angry. It was heartbroken. "I know." Those two words carried 15 years of regret. Because he was right. I should have left. But people always imagine strength is easy when looking backward. It isn't. Sometimes survival looks like staying. Even when staying hurts. Chloe wiped tears from her eyes. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I wanted you to have a normal childhood." Neither of them spoke. They finally understood. Not just what happened, but what it cost. The sacrifices. The loneliness. The years spent carrying secrets. For the first time, my children weren't seeing me as their mother. They were seeing me as a woman. And somehow that mattered more than I expected. Before they left, Chloe hugged me longer than she had in years. "I'm proud of you." The words hit harder than anything else. Because for decades, I'd worried my children would hate me for ending the marriage. Instead, they finally understood why I had to. After they left, I sat alone in the quiet house. And for the first time in a long time, I cried. Not because I was sad. Because I was relieved. The truth was finally out. And I wasn't carrying it alone anymore. A month later, I made another decision. One that shocked everyone. Including my children. I decided to sell the house. The house was beautiful. Large. Comfortable. Filled with memories. But it was also filled with ghosts. Every room reminded me of sacrifices. Arguments. Disappointments. Broken promises. 30 years of putting myself last. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life surrounded by reminders of who I'd been. I wanted a place that reflected who I was becoming. When I told Ethan and Chloe, they were stunned. But that's our family home. I smiled gently. It was. The distinction mattered. Past tense. I spent weeks sorting through closets. Old decorations. Photo albums. Furniture. Keepsakes. Some things I donated. Some I sold. Some I kept. Only the things that truly mattered. Not because they belonged to my old life, but because they still belonged to me. The house sold surprisingly fast. A young couple bought it. They were expecting their first child. The woman cried when she walked through the nursery. The man couldn't stop smiling. Watching them reminded me of Thomas and me 30 years earlier. Before everything became complicated. Before disappointment settled in. And strangely enough, I felt happy for them. The house deserved another beginning. Just like I did. 2 months later, I moved into a bright condominium overlooking a small park outside Franklin. It wasn't enormous. It wasn't luxurious. But every inch of it belonged to me. The morning sunlight flooded through oversized windows. The balcony overlooked trees instead of neighbors. And for the first time in my life, I had a room dedicated entirely to myself. A studio. The day I unpacked my art supplies felt emotional. Not because the materials were expensive. Because they represented a forgotten dream. Before marriage. Before motherhood. Before sacrifice. I wanted to be an artist. Somewhere along the way, that version of me disappeared. Or so I thought. As it turns out, she had simply been waiting. I bought a leather sketchbook. A new set of pencils. Fresh paints. And one afternoon I sat by the window and started drawing. At first my hands felt rusty. Uncertain. Then something incredible happened. The years disappeared. The creativity returned. The joy returned. The part of myself I'd abandoned came home. One sketch became 2. 2 became 10. Soon I was drawing every day. Landscapes, portraits, memories, pieces of emotions I didn't know how to describe any other way. Then Chloe had an idea. You should sell these. I laughed. Nobody would buy them. Apparently I was wrong. 3 months later, I opened a small online shop. Prints, original sketches, custom commissions. Nothing huge. Nothing flashy. But people bought them. Every sale felt like proof that life wasn't over. It was beginning again. One rainy afternoon, nearly 6 months after Thomas moved out, there was a knock at my door. I knew who it was immediately. Some instincts never disappear. When I opened the door, Thomas stood there. He looked older. Not physically. Emotionally. Like life had finally caught up with him. The arrogance was gone. The confidence was gone. Even his posture seemed different. Smaller somehow. He looked at me quietly. Rebecca. I didn't invite him inside. He noticed. And accepted it. I just wanted to talk. I leaned against the doorframe. You have 5 minutes. He nodded. For several seconds he simply stood there, trying to find the words. Eventually they came. I was wrong. Simple. Direct. Honest. More honest than he'd been in years. I didn't respond. He continued. I spent a long time blaming everyone except myself. The rain fell softly behind him. I thought I deserved more excitement. He laughed bitterly. Turns out I destroyed the best thing I ever had. I listened. Calm. Detached. Not angry. Not emotional. Just listening. Because his apology wasn't something I needed anymore. It was something he needed to give. I hurt you. Yes. I took you for granted. Yes. I don't expect forgiveness. For the first time I smiled. That's good. A sad laugh escaped him. Fair enough. We stood there quietly. Two people who once built a life together. Now strangers connected only by history. Finally he looked around the condo. The artwork. The plants. The sunlight. The peace. Then he looked back at me. You seem happy. I nodded. I am. There was genuine sadness in his eyes. Not because he wanted me back. Because he finally understood what he'd lost. And loss always arrives too late. Eventually he took a step backward. I guess that's all I wanted to say. I nodded. Take care of yourself, Thomas. He looked surprised. Then grateful. Yes. Another pause. Then he turned and walked away. No dramatic goodbye. No emotional embrace. No second chances. Just acceptance. I closed the door softly. And that was the last time I ever saw him. Months passed. Then a year. Life continued. Quietly. Beautifully. My art business grew. I started teaching weekend drawing classes at a community center. Women of every age attended. Some divorced. Some widowed. Some simply searching for themselves. We laughed. We sketched. We healed. Together. One morning, nearly 2 years after the divorce, I received a handwritten letter. No return address. I recognized the handwriting instantly. Thomas. Inside was a single page. Short. Simple. Rebecca. I hope you're happy. I hope you found the peace I never gave you. For a long time I blamed circumstances. Age. Stress. Work. Anyone but myself. Now I understand the damage I caused. And I understand that losing you was the consequence of my own choices. Thank you for the years we shared. And thank you for teaching me that silence can be louder than anger. I truly am sorry. Thomas. I folded the letter carefully, then tucked it inside my sketchbook. Not because I needed closure, because it was the final page of a chapter that had already ended. Today, I sit on my balcony most mornings with a cup of coffee and my sketchbook. The park below is usually full of joggers, dogs, and children playing. Life moves forward, as it always does. And sometimes I think about the woman I used to be. The woman who felt invisible. The woman who spent years begging to be loved. The woman who believed everyone else's happiness mattered more than her own. I don't miss her, but I'm grateful for her, because she survived long enough for me to become this woman. The woman who finally chose herself. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Justice doesn't always arrive in a courtroom. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in a peaceful home, a fresh start, a calm heart, and the realization that your worth was never determined by the people who failed to see it. Thank you for listening to my story. And before you go, I'd love to know, if you were in my position, what would have been the moment you finally walked away? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe to Hidden Karma Stories, and let me know where you're watching from. I read every single comment.